Why would a stranger leave a bag of oranges on my doorstep at midnight? That was the first thought running through Samir's mind when he saw the small bundle lying in the dim porch light. He stood there with his heart pounding, holding the cold metal door handle, and staring at the bright oranges like they were a mistake. Samir was an orange seller. Not a big one. Not a famous one. Just a man with a small cart, a worn-out umbrella, and a tired smile that never quite reached his eyes anymore. He sold oranges in the same neighborhood every day, from dawn until the streetlights flickered on. But this week was different. He had been late paying the rent. His son's school fees were overdue. His mother's medicine had run out. And the cart's wheel had been squeaking so badly that people started walking past him like he wasn't even there. Samir had tried to stay calm. He had tried to be patient. He had tried to convince himself that things would get better. But when the landlord had knocked on his door and said, "You have 2 days," the calm inside him broke. So he did what he always did when life got heavy. He went to work. He pushed his cart through the early morning mist. He set up under the same tree where he had been selling for years. He smiled at the same faces, the same regulars, the same tired strangers. He sold oranges to everyone except the one person who mattered most. The man in the gray jacket. The man who walked by every day, never buying, always looking at the oranges as if he was counting them in his head. Samir had noticed him for months. He was always in a hurry, always checking his phone, always glancing at the cart like it was a reminder of something he didn't want to face. That morning, the man stopped. "Your oranges are expensive," he said, not unkindly. Samir forced a smile. "Prices are the same. Fresh oranges. Good quality." The man looked at the oranges again, then at Samir, and something in his eyes softened for a moment. "Your son is in school, right?" Samir blinked. "Yes." The man nodded as if he already knew. "Then you should be proud." Samir didn't know what to say. Pride felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. The man paid for one orange and walked away. Samir watched him go, feeling a strange ache. It wasn't anger. It was something else. A quiet disappointment that he had never been able to help someone who seemed to be reaching out. That evening, Samir returned home with only a handful of rupees. He sat on the floor, staring at the small pile of bills, and felt the weight of the world settle on his shoulders. His son, Arif, walked in with his school bag slung over his shoulder. He looked at his father's face and immediately knew something was wrong. "Did you sell enough?" Arif asked. Samir swallowed hard. "Not enough." Arif's face tightened. "Then we will go hungry." Samir shook his head. "No. We will not go hungry." But he didn't know how to promise something he couldn't deliver. That night, Samir lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the city outside. The sound of cars. The sound of people laughing. The sound of life moving on without him. He thought about the oranges. He thought about the man in the gray jacket. He thought about the strangers who walked past him every day without noticing his struggle. And then, just before he fell asleep, he remembered the one thing he had never allowed himself to do. Ask for help. The next morning, Samir woke up early. He walked to the small market where he bought his oranges. He stood there, looking at the crates of fruit, and tried to figure out how he would buy enough for the day. He didn't have enough money. He was about to turn away when he heard a voice behind him. "You need help." Samir turned. The man in the gray jacket stood there, holding a small envelope. Samir stared. "You again?" The man nodded. "I've been watching you. I see you every day." Samir's throat tightened. "Why?" The man hesitated. "Because I used to be you." Samir didn't understand. "What do you mean?" The man sighed. "I used to sell fruit too. I used to push a cart like this. I used to feel like the world was closing in." Samir's eyes filled with tears. He didn't want to cry in public, but his body didn't care about pride. The man handed him the envelope. "Open it," he said. Samir looked at the envelope like it was a trap. He slowly tore it open. Inside were bills enough to buy a whole week of oranges. Samir's hands shook. "Why?" he whispered. The man didn't answer right away. He looked at Samir's face as if trying to find the right words. "Because," he said, "someone once helped me when I was desperate. And I never forgot it." Samir stared at him, speechless. The man continued, "You don't need to pay me back. Just promise me you will not lose yourself in the struggle." Samir nodded, but he couldn't speak. He felt something in him shift, like a door had opened that he had been keeping shut for years. He wanted to ask the man his name. But the man already turned to leave. "Wait," Samir called out. The man paused. Samir swallowed. "Who are you?" The man looked back, and for the first time, Samir noticed the small scar on his cheek. It was faint, but it was there. Like a reminder of something painful. "My name is not important," the man said. "What matters is what you do next." Then he walked away. Samir stood there for a long time, holding the envelope, feeling the weight of the money like it was both a blessing and a responsibility. That day, Samir sold more oranges than he had in weeks. He smiled genuinely for the first time in a long time. He laughed with customers. He made small talk. He felt alive. He went home that evening with enough money to pay the rent. He gave his son new school shoes. He bought his mother medicine. He felt like he had been given a second chance. But the next day, something happened that Samir didn't expect. The man in the gray jacket returned. He walked up to the cart and stood there, looking at Samir. "Today," he said, "I want to buy your oranges." Samir blinked. "Of course. You already helped me." The man shook his head. "I didn't help you. You helped yourself." Samir frowned. "What are you talking about?" The man pointed to the cart. "Look at your customers. Look at how you talk to them. You were quiet before. You were closed. You looked like you were carrying the world on your shoulders." Samir's face burned with embarrassment. The man continued, "Now you're different. You're still struggling. But you are not drowning." Samir looked away. He didn't know what to say. The man leaned in slightly and lowered his voice. "I'm not here to buy oranges," he said. "I'm here to tell you something." Samir waited. The man's eyes softened. "The world doesn't owe you anything. But it will give you what you deserve when you stop believing that you don't deserve anything." Samir felt his heart tighten. He wanted to argue. He wanted to say that life had been unfair. That he had worked hard. That he deserved better. But the man's words weren't about fairness. They were about something deeper. They were about how Samir had been living. He had been surviving, not living. That night, Samir sat with his son on the small rooftop of their home. The air was cool, and the city lights looked like scattered stars. Arif leaned against his father and said, "Dad, I feel like things are changing." Samir looked at his son and smiled, but the smile was quiet. It wasn't a triumph. It was a gentle acceptance. "I hope so," Samir replied. Arif nodded. "I want to help you too." Samir's eyes filled with tears. "You already do," he said softly. Days turned into weeks. Samir continued selling oranges. The money was still tight, but he was no longer crushed by it. And then, one evening, something happened that made his heart stop. He came home to find his mother sitting on the floor, holding a small piece of paper. She was crying quietly, but her eyes were bright with something he couldn't quite understand. "What is it?" Samir asked, rushing to her side. His mother handed him the paper. It was a note. It was from the man in the gray jacket. Samir's hands trembled as he read it. The note was short. It said, "I'm sorry for what happened to you. I didn't know you were there. I was wrong. I needed to fix it. I couldn't do it in person. But I wanted you to know that you were not invisible." Samir's heart raced. He looked at his mother. "What does this mean?" His mother shook her head, tears falling freely now. "I don't know," she whispered. "But I remember that man. He came to our house once, many years ago." Samir's mind flashed back to a memory he had buried. A night when his father had come home late, and there had been a fight. A night when a stranger had knocked on their door and left without saying a word. A night when his father had cried in front of his family for the first time. Samir had been too young to understand. But now he understood. The man in the gray jacket had been there. He had been there when Samir's father had fallen. And Samir had never noticed. Samir looked at the note again. He felt anger rising in him, but it wasn't directed at the man. It was directed at himself. Because he had spent years thinking the world was against him. When, in reality, the world had been trying to reach him. He sat down slowly on the floor, the note still in his hand, and he realized something that made his eyes sting. The man hadn't just helped him with money. He had opened a door. He had shown Samir that kindness could come from strangers. And that the past, no matter how painful, didn't have to define the future. Samir didn't know the man's name. He didn't know where he lived. He didn't know if he would ever see him again. But he knew this. Life could change overnight. And sometimes, the change came from a simple act of compassion. That night, Samir went to bed feeling a quiet peace he had never felt before. He didn't feel saved. He felt seen. And that was enough. He didn't know if karma was real. But he knew something else. The world had finally answered him. Not with a loud miracle. But with a small, bright bundle of oranges left on his doorstep. At midnight. When he least expected it.